welcome everybody to our fifth panel, actually, of this conference. Unfortunately, this panel will be all digital, so you have to, people in the room have to just see me here, but we will see our panelists on the screen online, so a warm welcome to them as well. I mean, we have been discussing since yesterday EU policies up to now along the Balkan route or in the Balkans, and we all are aware that ever since the war on Ukraine started on 4th of February, there has been an additional new refugee situation, which is of course ongoing and unfolding currently and in the future. And I read this morning already 4.5 million internally displaced people in Ukraine. And it's, as I say, I mean, the number is rising as we are speaking. 6.5 million internally displaced and 4 million who already left Ukraine. And this obviously is creating a new situation within Europe. And most of the people who fled so far are in Poland, but there are many people still on the move. And all neighboring countries have so far been receiving what is quite striking is the EU's response anonymously with triggering the temporary protection mechanism for the first time in the history of the European Union. This was decided upon within days, and I'm very happy to further discuss with our guests today not only the EU's response, but the European response, both from the authorities and from states, but also, of course, from people and civil society. For this purpose, we have today with us, and a warm welcome, Professor Monika Mokre from Vienna, who's actually an expert on solidarity in Europe and who will give us a broader picture of European policies with regard to people on the move. We have Giulia Amaducci with us from DG Home, from the European Commission, who will also elaborate on the temporary protection mechanism and what it really means for member states and people affected. We have Aigul Hakimova from Slovenia as activist and expert with fresh impressions, so to say, from the situation on the ground. And last but not least, Magda Faltova from Czech Republic. So, good to see you all four.
Thank you, hello. I don't know. Thank you, everybody. Do you tell us in which order we have to start, since you presented us in a different way comparing to the agenda? So tell us who of us has to start, if it's still me or someone else.
Well, I would invite in whatever order, but Aigul and Magda to first give us an impression from how it looks like currently with the people on the ground. I mean, we know the numbers. We know that almost half of these millions are children who fled Ukraine. Can you give us a first impression?
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to meet you, at least indirectly. Well, the situation in the Czech Republic is complicated. I will try to share just a very short data that I hope that you can see it. And I'm not sure if yeah, I can move it. I just wanted to show the situation in the Czech Republic when we look at the numbers at the very beginning, before I start to share the experience as a frontline responder to the refugee crisis or situation here, providing shelter services and other assistance to people coming from Ukraine. So the Czech Republic has been hosting until the war in Ukraine about 670,000 foreign population. From that, about one third were Ukrainians, and then there were almost 100,000 people as seasonal workers. However, since the start of the war, it seems, and it's the numbers are estimate. It's we think that there are probably more people than those who are registered, but about 250,000 temporary protection were granted in the Czech Republic, and about 140,000 people registered at the foreign police. We estimate that it's about 300,000 people here, as it seems, and now it's clear that the Czech Republic is one of the target countries for people coming from Ukraine. And of course, it's part of this is the quite substantial Ukrainian community already residing here, having being quite established and quite strong diaspora in terms of knowing the country. There are many people who came after the war who already been living in past or were living in past in the Czech Republic, and or they have relatives, friends, or further family in the country. If we look at the how it looks graphically, we see that it's a quite steep rise. However, now it seems that less people are coming, slightly less, but the numbers are still growing. We see more people actually transferring, more people are heading to out of the European Union. Quite substantial number of people are staying, which I wanted as well to put into the comparison the situation in Germany. And as you can see, about 3% of the population right now are compared to the number of refugees that came in the last 1 month. So the increase is very substantial, and it's definitely more complicated situation compared to years 2015, 2016 in Germany in terms of numbers in the country, but as well the intensity, the short term in which these people came.
Excuse me, Magda.
Yeah.
The presentation doesn't move for us, I guess.
Okay, sorry. That's so I'll just explain without the presentation. In Germany, about 1.4% of population, the number of refugees coming, which 1,200,000, were compared to 1.4% of the population. In the Czech Republic, this almost more than 300 people comprises of 3% of the population of the can you see it now? Is it better? Yeah. In 1 month. So the intensity of presence of the people and the necessity to really provide a rapid response from all parts of the society is quite evident. I will try to, no, I think that I cannot move it. Yeah. So I wanted to, in very short, talk about the reception process, about what happened in the country. since the war started. What we are seeing on the ground is that we have people are arriving and have been arriving individually in terms of not organized, entering the European Union on the borders and then moving farther to the Czech Republic through their contacts or with the help of volunteers, Czech society, and therefore they are registered in the country after the arrival, not at the borders of the Czech Republic, since the Czech Republic doesn't have outside border of the European Union. Quite fast. The response from the government was quite, I would say, rapid. And they decided to create this one-stop shop regional centers for registration of Ukrainian refugees. And it started after about a week since the war started. So it was open, the first were open on Saturday, the week after. Has been working quite well. The idea is that there is a registration. At the beginning, they were issuing the tolerated state visa that were later on replaced by the temporary protection, both valid for 1 year. There was a decision of the government to pay humanitarian benefit, which is 5,000 crowns per month per individual. So for the family, you count each individual, including children. However, there was a decision that there is no access to regular social benefit system. The people are registered at these centers to public health insurance. They can open the bank accounts in order to receive the humanitarian benefit. And later, after the opening of the services, the social services started to operate mainly for people with who are in some vulnerable situation, disabled. We see quite a lot of people who have special needs coming to the Czech Republic, and there is the option to interconnect with the social services at the territory through already in the CATS pool. It works sometimes it doesn't, and it's as well relevant for unaccompanied minors because the workers of legal protection of the children should be available in these centers as well. People can receive accommodation as well in these centers. However, it is clear that the accommodation is one of the biggest challenges that we are now facing and have been from the very beginning facing in this critical situation. There is emergency accommodation available only, which means that people are placed to short-term accommodation. Now we basically, especially in bigger cities as Prague or Brno, people are placed in the school gyms and facilities that are not available or fit for the long-term accommodation. As I mentioned, it's still the biggest challenge. Many people are accommodated in households, at friends, volunteers, without really long-term vision how it will be organized by the state in future. The problem is as well that people who do not, that there are many people who are not identified as vulnerable, that there is actually quite a huge lack of needs assessment, even in those emergency accommodations, because there are not enough social services and care workers or assistants available. We are, of course, fighting with the capacity of schools and kindergartens, as well as the healthcare system. People are covered by the public health insurance and they are entitled to access the healthcare system. However, there is a limited capacity for like proper registration. People can get emergency care, of course, but for example, to access to put children into kindergartens, you need a pediatrics checks, and people are not able to get it. Therefore, they cannot really place children into the education. There is starting to be a challenge in terms of access to labor market, because people are quite stressed to start work very early, which leads to low-skilled jobs mainly. And as well, there is not enough childcare. Therefore, since those are mainly women and with children, they cannot really access the labor market that fast. Of course, the same challenges that we have been seeing past when working with refugees and migrants, recognition of diploma and education, and low-skilled jobs and labor exploitation are quite visible already now. There are quite positive responses in terms of when you look at this Czech Republic as a country to be ever welcoming to the refugees population. It's quite surprising. Of course, for us working in the field for several years, it's slightly frustrating since we were not able to welcome any refugees until now. And now however, now the society is really responding with the very positive response. People are hosting people at their homes. There's a lot of volunteers, and basically all the reception system and is now heavily relying on the on volunteers, not only used by the civil society as our organization, but as well cities and the state is really heavily placing the setup of the system on refugees. We are lucky that we have strong Ukrainian diaspora who is participating, and there were quite fast legislative responses as well in terms of change of the law on temporary protection, social benefits. They changed the law on the access to the labor market, so it's easy. There are already changes in the law or on the childcare, specifically opening this the system of adaptation groups, so the children are placed in safe space and waiting for the schools to make capacities to actually accept all the children who are coming. In terms of civil society, yeah, we are stepping in, and we started to step in from the very beginning, providing the emergency accommodation really for the at the beginning of the war. So we opened our facilities, or we started to open facilities together with the hostels in Prague on Friday after the war started, because people started to come. And we are still actually first responders to many people, and together with, of course, other NGOs, to most of the people who are coming to the Czech Republic. However, of course, we are not sure how actually long it can work like this, and we need for the state to set up stronger systemic changes in reception, but mainly for the integration of those people who are coming.
Magda, we will go more into detail. I would really like to also give the others to floor to thank you so much for this so far, to really allow for enough time for discussion also. So if I can ask Aygul to give us your impressions from, I mean, many things I'm sure will be relevant for the discussion later on. We've already heard many relevant challenges, like, you know, concrete challenges on the ground. And we have a lot to discuss when it comes to this specific situation as compared to the reaction to people on the move so far. So I think we still have a lot to talk. So the floor is yours, Aygul.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me to this really very impressive and very comprehensive seminar. I have been listening whole day yesterday and today. And well, my first impression is actually a kind of a shadow from my Belarusian and Poland experiences that are, you know, I'm outrageous still. I am very emotional. I cannot normally function lately, not because of the solidarity that is shown in our European countries, but because of different European and local contexts that we've been witnessing lately. So for me, okay, I will just give you a few sentences to wrap up my impressions as an individual that has been working in the struggle, working in the field of migration and being the part of struggles for freedom of movement and right to stay for 20 years in Slovenia, which is the part of the Balkan route, and Slovenia pushed back people, 30,000 in last 2 years, and it approved 19 people statuses of international protection last year, 2021. So we are seeing this in the context of our already existing migration policy and non-existing actually policy to guarantee people international protection statuses according to Geneva Convention and all other things. So it's first of all, it's a big hypocrisy. It's a big double standard. It's a big fail of universal human rights. And it's a big politicization of this war. This is my opinion. Despite the fact that, and you know, I speak Russian and I work with Ukrainians, it goes like this, you know. Every time refugees move, they are politicized lately. It happened on Belarusian Polish border, and it's going on right now. And now Slovenia accepted this temporary protection act for displaced persons very fast, but it's an old law, you know, because the European directive came very many years ago, and then it was just reactivated and operational put. So while I am talking right now here, there is a big public conference of our national authorities giving to public exact instructions on how to accommodate refugees from Ukraine. I read yesterday the law and the operational act, both of them, and the differences in rights for asylum seekers who are under the International Protection Act and for people who are coming according to the Temporary Protection Act are enormous, shameful. I'm sorry, our asylum seekers, they receive 18 euros of pocket money per month. And now people will receive almost 6-7 times more. So I'm just thinking that we are bureaucratically not able to make things more clear. We are multiplying the statuses of foreigners or people on the move who try to settle down with more laws, with more acts that are differentiating their rights, right for labor market, right for social allowances, right for healthcare, right for accommodation and everything. Everything, all what I listed completely differs from what our asylum seekers, non-white, have at this moment by law. You know, I'm just telling you, I'm not, you know, I don't wanna sound that I'm against something. No, I just want to tell you that there is a very clear discrimination and a very clear differentiation of rights of people coming and asking for protection. This is my first. And then maybe later I can explain you in more details what are these rights or what are not these rights, you know? We went burnout while assisting safe groups on Polish-Belarusian border. We've seen such atrocities from the Polish army border police, and I have never seen such an intense propaganda against, you know, where the agency of refugees are completely out. I mean, so I'm talking about the, you know, we can improve our human rights philosophy or whatever in European Union only if we accept deep and very clear critique of our European migration policy based on double-faced and hypocritical principles. This is what I'm saying. Sorry, this is for the beginning. I'm sorry for being a little bit like this, but I think time that we are living right now demands also this kind of reactions.
Thank you, Aygul. Thank you very much. I think we are already in the middle of relevant questions for our discussion, indeed. I would like to very warmly welcome Giulia Amaducci from DG Home to give us, to explain to us how this temporary protection mechanism came up, what it really means, and it would be great if you could also look into the differences that were observed in the treatment of different asylum seekers.
Yes, hello everybody. So I'm Giulia Amaducci, I work for the DG Home in the Home Affairs unit, international relations, and I'm responsible for Western Balkans in reality. So all this Ukrainian crisis, I'm looking at not as a specific my file, but you know, I will give you the general lines of what was the intervention of the EU in terms of EU policy. I will leave it that double standard thing that you mentioned, maybe eventually for the debate. I will not be able, of course, to reply to all your questions. Critical and non-critical. So, and while I'm speaking, things evolving. So I keep receiving information here as I am in front of my computer. So I will see if I manage to reply to some of your questions also by digging into what's coming in now in real time. Otherwise, either I take note of what has been asked or I just don't reply. Voila. So I'm here also to give a general review and listen to the debate and aware of all the criticism, and useful to listen to them, and of course not be able to reply or to defend all positions that are criticized here. But we are, the nice things is that we are different, we have different approaches, we have different parcours and way of seeing things. So I'm just, I don't have slides, but I'm going to give you the main lines of the intervention of the EU in terms of figures. I've seen the first slides of our colleague from the first intervention, but she just went quickly, so I will just give you the main figures. So we have calculated almost 6.5 million internally displaced persons since the beginning of the war, and of which 3.8 million fled from Ukraine, and 174,000 are non-Ukrainians. The top nationalities are Indians, Azerbaijanis, and Russians. And the reported arrivals in member states no border in the Ukraine is 1,232,500. And then 1,233,000 registration for temporary protections, and we have 19,000 asylum application by Ukrainian nationals in the member states. I'm not going to mention here the humanitarian aid, nor the sanctions, nor the military aid. I will mention the temporary protection directive, the operational guidelines, the solidarity platform, and then some funding issues, and then I can give you some additional information of the last 48 hours. So in terms of temporary protection directive, as you mentioned before, it was triggered of the EU Home Affairs Minister on the 4th of March for the people fleeing the war in Ukraine. And the idea behind is that everyone fleeing the conflict must be granted access to the EU. Those eligible for temporary protection will be able to stay in the EU for at least 1 year until March 2023, and will be given a residence permit and access to education and to the labor market and housing as well. They can stay so for 1 year, and unless their protection status is terminated otherwise, it may be extended automatically by 6 months and then again another 6 months. So at the end of the year, they can stay 1 year additional, and then the member states can decide also to renew it for an additional year until March 2025. Then, of course, we have to see how the situation goes. The temporary protection applies to the Ukrainian nationals that are residing in Ukraine on the 24th of February, and the refugees, as well as their family members, are all eligible for protections. The non-Ukrainian nationals and stateless people legally residing in Ukraine who cannot return to their country of region of origin, such as asylum seekers or beneficiaries of international protection and their family members, will also be granted protection in the EU, either under the directive or under national temporary protection legislation. All other third country nationals who are legally present in Ukraine for a short terms, like for studies or for work, and those who are able to return safely to the country of origins will fall outside the scope of this protection. Nevertheless, they should be allowed access to the EU for transit prior to returning to their countries of origins. And if they cannot return home as it is unsafe, they can apply for asylum in the EU. So this is the main point for the temporary protection. Then the Commission also has issued operational guidelines to help member states, border guards in managing arrivals at the borders with Ukraine in a more efficient way. And the facilitation includes the simplification of border controls at the EU borders with Ukraine, the flexibility as regarding entry conditions, allowing crossing at temporary border crossing points, and then easy access for rescue services and humanitarian assistance. And plus, well, this is an additional thing, for personal belongings and pets, they don't need to declare it any custom, they don't have any custom duties, and then there is a facilitation for bringing their own pets. Then a solidarity platform has been set up to support the implementation of a temporary protection directive. And this will allow to coordinate the cooperation and exchange of information among member states. And it brings together member states, EU agency, and it will work alongside this network called the EU Migration Preparedness and Crisis Management Network, which produce a blueprint every day and given the state of the situation. And this solidarity platform collects the needs identified in member states and coordinates the operation of follow-ups. It gives an overview of the reception capacities in member states and how numbers of people enjoying temporary protection and other needs for additional support. We will match the offers for solidarity with the needs identified and also help organize the transfer of people within the EU and member states that have reception capacities. And also will help establish pathways towards non-EU countries that have already hosted significant Ukrainian communities, such as Canada or the United Kingdom. And particular attention is being given to the transfer of displaced people from Ukraine to EU member states. And the Commission is working with EU member states and agency and the EU agency and international organization to operationalize this transfer in an orderly manner. Then in terms of funding, this is the last important point, is that as President von der Leyen has announced recently, we are making up to 17 billion available, mostly from the cohesion funds, to support the member states and to welcome those fleeing the war. And this war money can be used for schooling, housing, and healthcare. And then also for the Asylum, Migration, Integration Funds and Border Management and Visa Instruments Fund, which includes also emergency assistance, the Commission is proposing to prolong the implementation period for this money available to member states under a previous program, which was ended in 2020, to prolong it and be able to continue to spend it also afterwards. And this will freeze us at least 420 million in additional support. And then, of course, we have the new funds, which will help also in managing the situation. Then I had just few little additional information is that we have this Stand Up for Ukraine campaign, and the Commission has created a new system to channel in-kind donation from the private sector to Ukraine and Moldova and neighboring EU member states to help cater for the needs of displaced persons and refugees. And then, okay, Frontex and Europol also has deployed their staff at the borders or were requested. Voilà. Then there's some additional practical information, and maybe it's not interesting now, but maybe I can develop later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. That was a good first insight. I mean, indeed, it strikes our mind how impressive this reaction is. I mean, we see a very fast response. We see a system in place. This system exists for almost 20 years. Actually, yeah. It wasn't triggered before, so one could indeed ask the question, why wasn't it, for instance, there was a big discussion. I was in Berlin back then in 2015 when we saw the rise in number of Syrian asylum seekers reaching the EU. So there were discussions back then on triggering this mechanism, but it did not happen. And I would like to bring in Monica, because indeed what Aigu pointed at, I mean, the situation is so impressive. We have this very fast response on EU level, and we see this tremendous solidarity on a civil society basis. However, looking at Poland in particular, and this is what Aigu was strongly pointing at, we see that we have this spontaneous, impressive societal response and state response. And some kilometers up north, we see another situation, a very different situation at the Belarusian-Polish border. So if you could give us your first insight into the state of solidarity and response and the differences that are there.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. Let me start up a bit with talking about this directive. I mean, it was mentioned, but so the directive is very old. It is from 2001. It was developed because of the problems that the European Union had during the Yugoslav wars. Problems is a way of putting it mildly, to have some kind of common response. There was none, and especially with regard to refugees from Kosovo. And then there was this idea to have this temporary protection mechanism, which makes a lot of sense, basically. That it was never used then, I guess, has the same reasons as it had that the EU was not able to do that during the Yugoslav wars, because there was no unified voice about that. And as you said, I mean, there were 3 times, as far as I know, when it was discussed to use this protection, temporary protection. One was in 2011, when Malta and Italy called for that because of the refugees from the Arab Spring, and especially from Libya. One was, as mentioned, in 2015. And the last one was then in 2019. And this, 2019, and this, I think, is very interesting, because actually Josep Borrell, the High Representative, discussed if it couldn't be used for refugees from Afghanistan after the US troops would leave there or left there. It was never used. There was never even a proposal by the European Commission. With regard to the situation in Afghanistan, I mean, talking from my Austrian perspective, I have to say that there were deportations to Afghanistan up to the point when the Taliban really took over the power in all parts of the country. I tend to agree to a very high degree to the interpretation of Aigu here. There is a very specific definition now of worthy refugees. And I would like to emphasize, but I think it is clear, I'm very happy for everybody who gets protection. This is no question. Huh? But still, I think we have to analyze this situation. And this is this first point. The directive was never used, and now it is used, and we can ask why this is the case. We also, and this is something I have been dealing with. I mean, it's true that I'm an academic, but I also have been an activist in this field for, well, not 20, but 10 years at least. What we are dealing now in Austria is also the question of people who don't have Ukrainian citizenship but lived in Ukraine. Julia also mentioned that there is a quite significant number of them. And obviously they are coming due to the same reason as Ukrainian citizens. They are fleeing from war. The directive is very limited, not the directive, the decision on the directive is very limited when it comes to these people. Julia mentioned that. So, I mean, people who have international protection in Ukraine have the same position as Ukrainian citizens. People who had permanent residency and are in danger when they go back to their country of origin should get some kind of protection. This is also said. And then for people who had temporary residence, I mean, Julia, correct me if I'm wrong here, but for them there is a recommendation in the first part that they should be able to enter the EU and then should be helped or whatever to get back to the country of origin. I must confess that I do not really understand this passage, because when I'm in danger in my country of origin, I'm not very interested to go back there. The proposal by the Commission was much better. In the proposal of the Commission, there should be the same rights for all kinds of people who are in danger in their country of origin, as well as for people with a permanent residence in Ukraine, irrespectively of their in danger or not. And there are reasons for that, why the member states, the council did not accept that. I only hear that via rumors, but whatever, maybe Julia knows more. It's also somehow maybe not that important. What we see here, and this is something that we also see in all other fields, is this principle of citizenship and nationality. Which is our general problem when we are dealing with refugees and migrants, obviously. But also, I mean, for instance, you know, when you have Afghan refugees with Afghan citizenship who have lived for their whole life in Iran, they come to Austria, let's say they have an asylum procedure, their asylum is negative because they're not persecuted in their country of origin, where they have never lived. And so this is now an issue, and an issue with which we also are dealing on a practical level, which means we try to figure out what we can do for those non-Ukrainian citizens coming from Ukraine in Austria. We have very limited possibilities here, because as Julia also said, I mean, the member states can decide how to implement this directive. And I hear also it's not fixed, but for instance, the Netherlands will be much more generous with regard to these non-Ukrainian citizens. In Austria, there's nothing, to put it in a nutshell. It's the minimum is implemented that is necessary legally by the decision. And okay, as said before, I mean, people who are endangered in their country of origin can ask for asylum. Of course, everybody can do that. This is not a very, it's not a great thing. So this is what I want briefly to say about the legal situation. By the way, just mentioning that, because I will talk also about the financial situation of the individuals. This is different in Austria. Individual Ukrainians get the same amount of money as asylum seekers get, which is 370 euros. This is not very satisfactory because nobody lives in Austria from 370 euros, which we can see by the fact that the minimal income that you get as an Austrian who doesn't have a job is 944 or something. And this is just above the poverty line. Huh? So, I mean, it's clear that this doesn't work. But Ukrainians have free access to the labor market, which makes a huge difference, among other many differences. And then just briefly, with regard to discourse now, because this is something, and I think here we see it even more clearly, but what Eigul was described. I mean, one thing which was striking for me is that in the Austrian Ministry for Interior Affairs, it was said at one point, we should not talk about refugees from Ukraine, but about displaced people. So the refugees now are obviously those who are not worthy of protection, but it is the displaced people, and I cannot go into that. In German, this has even another connotation. Vertriebene, this is usually used for the German minorities who had to leave Eastern Europe after the Second World War. So this is a very interesting and difficult political connotation. There are many, then there are these other discourses saying, well, these are our European brothers and sisters and whatever have you. Have you, whereas I have to say, at least in Austria, up to last month or maybe February, it was not so clear that Ukraine is really Europe and fully European. I mean, there are very strong anti-Slavic sentiments also in Austria, probably because we are most of Slavic origin, and they included Ukraine. Now it's just about Russia. There is also a kind of public debate where politicians say all the time, you cannot compare the situation now to 2015. And then comes all that up, what I said before, and what I was said very impressively. These are Europeans, they have our values, whatever have we. I never know what our values are, but still they have them. And one last thing before I stop, what I also think really, really problematic is that there is now clear discrimination, official discrimination of Russian citizens. I'm now dealing with, or I start to discuss with academic institutions who explicitly now exclude Russians from projects, from even applying for a job or whatever. And well, I don't think that I have to explain that we have a problem here. Yeah, so I stop for now, I guess.
Thank you very much, Monica. So we already have a couple of really relevant questions here, I think. I also want to really open up the panel to, or the discussion to our participants here in the room. I'd invite everyone to, I mean, we have a lot to question, but two things I think got very clear. On the one hand, we see the differences in reaction, in treatment of asylum seekers now and so far, like from Ukraine and so far. We even see differences being made between different people fleeing the same war in Ukraine. So there are many levels of, let's say, differentiation. On the other hand, I must admit, I have always, working in migration, there always have been a form of hierarchy when it came to solidarity and rights from states levels and from authorities. This is unfortunately, I think, not a new phenomenon, but a very it's quite extreme. And of course, I think we all agree to what Monica said, that every person that is fleeing war and searching protection should be protected for sure. However, I wonder what this will create, these differences in legal terms, the differences now we have in terms of access and protection. And you mentioned it, thank you, Monica, because we also talked about the differences, for instance, in language and then different narratives. I think it was Stavros yesterday mentioning the Greek minister for migration, for instance, for the first time speaking of refugees, while so far it was always only illegal migrants. So there are obviously many issues here to discuss, and at the same time, and this got very clear from what Magda said, it's not as if we don't have any issues concerning people fleeing Ukraine. I mean, we see the differences also between the EU member states. And we, even though we have a huge solidarity movement, a civil solidarity, which is quite impressive, I must say, the question to me stays, how long will this last? Because we saw a lot of solidarity, getting back to the example of Germany in 2015. To be honest, many pictures of solidarity at the train stations, for instance, remind me of experiences I made in 2015. And there, the solidarity unfortunately did not last at all. So I would say so. Maybe I would kindly ask you to give me your ideas on how will this develop further in practice in the member states, within our societies, and will this solidarity last? What are the problems that are created now through these uneven treatments, what, I mean, will they lead to? Where will they lead to? So your reflections, whoever wants first, I go.
I just wanted to share my experience. A week ago, I went to our main state body. We have a state body that for integration and accommodation of migrants, it's called. It's actually a kind of independent body, but it's under the Ministry of Internal Affairs. So they started mobilizing people to get employed in order to help Ukrainians arriving, because we have at this moment 7,000 Ukrainians who arrived in Slovenia. Only 7,000. It's not your numbers, Magda. I completely understand the neighboring countries. It's completely different. But our ministry said that we will accept 200,000, you know, and then they opened one camp which was meant for 200. They put 300 people. And volunteers said to me such a horrible things. I wouldn't, you know, it's like politicizing all the time because we have elections on one side. And I went for a job position conversation because I thought that maybe I will be, with my experiences and with my language knowledge, will be very helpful for the situation. And during the conversation, I was not directly suggested not to use Russian language, you know. And then I was very shocked. Okay, it was not the problem actually, because now Slovenia is going to open up a few camps for Ukrainian refugees who will stay in camp have completely different rights from the ones who will stay in private accommodation in terms of money they receive. You know, if you are in private accommodation, you are entitled to receive social. As you said, Magda, refugees are not entitled to nationally recognized social daily allowances. In our country, in Slovenia, refugees from Ukraine under Temporary Protection Act are entitled as citizens to social programs, okay? So this is different. So there are 7,000. And then I went to one big non-governmental organizations and I met more than 35, 40 women, ladies. And I spoke to them and we had really beautiful time, and we were using the language that we used to use in Soviet Union before. And then I found out that it's not only as Professor Monica said, it's this discrimination is receiving absurdic elements, you know, of this. And then I said, okay, so our government, which is absolutely right-wing and which is trying to win the elections, they are warmongers, they are trying to put fuel on this war, are trying to separate Slovenians and Russians and Ukrainian migrants already living in Slovenia by dividing them, you know, by dividing normal people underground with their policies. So what I found out, that what they are saying is not true, and it's on us that we have to work even harder, although we've been doing it like from 2015. Oh my God, I mean, we can, and now especially with pushbacks, but now we have to put twice more energy and effort not to raise the hatred among European societies where Ukrainians and Russians live together, you know? Because our official politicians, they want us to hate Russians, and we will not hate them because Ukrainians, they all speak both. They are from there. When I was born, I was bilingual. And when Ukrainians are born, they are bilingual. You know, we should respect this. And I find this very dangerous moments in European Union of this big Russophobia. I will say now something that I hope will not offend anybody here. I see all elements of methodological anti-Semitism right now, and I see the blockade, censorship in European Union. You cannot find information And I see really big pressure on something that can unite us and not. Really, this is the Europe right now. Sorry.
Thank you, Aygul. Indeed, we heard yesterday about the role of elections and how prior to elections we had the example of Bosnia, and how prior to elections migration policies would change. So this is something that I think unfortunately is a common issue. Magda, can you reflect on what we heard from Slovenia? Do you face similar issues coming up?
Well, I mean, we definitely see this, and I think that we see it in the whole Europe, this different passes of access to protection to different people. And I mentioned that, yes, people from Ukraine get priority right now. Their access to protection is easier. On the other hand, we are critical to the fact that the temporary protection is for 1 year, and there is right now, it's not clear how it will be prolonged and if. And it's quite obvious now that it's not possible for people to access any other permits from the temporary protection permit for the future, which we are quite critical as well, because the Ukrainian diaspora is quite big here, and there are people in kind of limbo situation already with some permit, then changing to the temporary protection for some reason, and then going back to the permit, and these kind of like specific situations. As was mentioned concerning non-Ukrainians coming from Ukraine, it's a huge challenge as well. We are seeing family members, like children have Ukrainian passport, mother has different passport, then access to temporary protection for the mother is difficult. We challenge that, and I think that it will change quite soon. Sometimes it's a mistake or the decision of the government or the Ministry of Interior is against the law. On some situations, though, some people are not covered. We had at the beginning quite strong statements from politicians and as well civil society against Russophobia, and as well against people from Belarus. And it's here, but it's not systemic. There are some parts of some groups that, and some reactions of the society are against. But we have quite big communities of of Russians and Belarusians who are actually here because they are not they don't agree with the authoritarian regimes in their countries, and they had as well quite strong statements in public. So we are monitoring it. It's happening on the individual level, but it's not a systemic approach of the government and the society towards those people. And we are using actually many people from Russia and Belarus as interpreters and volunteers and people who are accompanying refugees from Ukraine, because actually the psychological impact of people from Ukraine on their situation leads to the fact that they are quite fragile in terms of working with people who are arriving. So Russian is basically, used quite widely in and by authorities as well. So it's not that huge problem. We are seeing situations where we know that people from other countries as Afghanistan and those who are already in asylum system are kind of left behind because of the capacity of the state. We hope it's only for a few months, but of course our experience from past is that it can be for years, and it's frustrating. And the situation at the Polish-Belarusian border, it's also of course frustrating for us as well, and it's been for years or months that's developing. So it's very difficult as well how to place and communicate these issues publicly with the general public and as well with politicians, because the history and acceptance of migration in the Czech Republic has been problematic for the last 10 years or something. So we are trying to put things into perspective on one side. On the other side, we need to work with this positive response. And as you mentioned, we know that the solidarity won't last, and we need to use it as long as possible, because otherwise there will be huge problems coming within the society, and the problems coming for those people who arrived, but as well for those who are already in the territory as migrants. So, thank you.
Thank you. I just, if I may, just want to mention that there's also huge solidarity, even though we witness, as you said, that capacities are already shifting from some groups away from people from Afghanistan or other countries to the newcomers now from Ukraine. I find it quite impressive how much solidarity we see within the refugee communities. For instance, this Syrian community in Germany was one of the first communities to really show solidarity with Ukrainians facing similar war experiences, which I found quite also touching, I must say. So I think it was Merciha yesterday on our first panel mentioning the chances, if I may say so, that are there in, okay, for years we have seen a deadlock on the EU level with regard to any joint decision, apart from strengthening border protection by more resources to the agency, and the cooperation with Turkey. But I think I would say from 2015-16 on, these were probably the two only joint policies that member states could agree upon. Julia, I would like to ask you whether you see this as a chance to overcome the blockade that was there for years, and to potentially also prove to the broader public that, you know, these fears of 2015 shall not be repeated. Whilst I remember Commissioner Johansson saying within a few days we've received more asylum seekers than in 2015 and 16 together. And I mean, we all know that nothing happened to the EU, right? Like this did not lead to any severe crisis, despite all the challenges that are there in the member states, and Magda made them very clear, and don't want to underestimate any of these for sure. But do you see this as a potential way out of the dilemma of migration being problematic and highly disputed?
Yeah, the dilemma of migration remains always a dilemma. But you know, we have to evolve and adapt to crisis. First of all, I want to say to you, I'm not pronouncing well, that, you know, this state of emotional state and not being able to function normally is happening to everybody, even for us working in institutions, that, you know, it's really dramatic, and it's hard every day to go ahead and to work and fail. You never break up, you know, it's constantly thinking about it. So, and what can you do as a person and as an institution? So there is no, as I said, one single institution, but I think that the Commission, the EU at all, has really made a huge step ahead. You know, this of course, this war in Ukraine had an immediate effect on us, given the number of people that came all in one go, as our Commission also said. I know in a few days we had 2.5 million people that, you know, had to flee their home. And of course, we are the European Union's direct neighbors. So of course we were members. We are bordering member states. So our bordering member states were the first countries of refugees. So of course we had to deal in a different way as from 2015. So I'll make a reference a little bit to 2015 and the crisis in Syria, and then what we can draw from this crisis. So in as was said before, that this temporary protection was triggered. Also, they thought about this triggering this temporary protection also in 2015 and 2016. But at that time, it was not considered as the best and proper things to do in that situation. It was not the most suited to the situation, which was characterized by different arrivals and from different nationalities that were crossing several member states and states before reaching the EU. The Ukrainians, they benefit from the visa-free travel, so they are already entitled to travel within the EU wherever they want. And now, of course, they are benefiting of this temporary protection wherever they are staying. And this was not the case for the Syrians and the other many nationalities that they were having at that time. The temporary protection with no binding relocation provisions at that time would not have alleviated the pressure on the countries which were the first entries. And this is why in 2016 the focus was to find a way to provide immediate assistance to the member states to alleviate the pressure that was created in the first countries of entries. And so that's why the Commission at that time proposed the mandatory relocation under Article 78.3 of the treaty. And at that time, this was also a historical decision. Then in practice, it didn't work as we would have liked. The people who came from Syria, most of them at that moment received the protection. As we know, Germany also welcomed a high number of refugees. And at that time, also at the moment, many member states expressed their willing to welcome some refugees and to help also the member states of first entry. Now it's true, the member states are much more united than before, and they really see the necessity of acting together. And this in a spirit of solidarity and helping each other. And this also because well, we some member states who were against migration before and refugees and welcoming them now face themselves in front of the same situation of Greece, of Italy, and other southern countries at that time. So this shows that, you know, one is sometimes the turn of the other. So it brings the idea that we have to work together all together in situation of crisis. And so each member state is confronted with a different type of migration crisis and challenges and a different time of their life. And so the understanding is that we have to work together and also we have to provide for common solutions. And the idea that behind the Migration Pact was to, you know, try to manage to have the possibility of manage situation of moment of crisis. So we should not keep going and reacting to crisis, but anticipate it and be ready for that. And this is what we are trying to push, and we hope that what happened now will bring also a little push of also non-migration pact or having an overall framework of management of migration. This is the only thing I can say. If it is having now a direct impact, as we talked about when we had this about bilateral discussion, I cannot say, time will say, but I think there is a big push. And as was mentioned before, the politicization of the crisis now, but migration, as we know, has been politicized in every moment, and it's an easy way to do electoral campaign. And of course, we have to be careful also on terminology and how we call, you know, irregular migration. We always come irregular migration and not illegal migration, as was mentioned before. And yes, we have to also avoid the way we talk about them and the terminology we use to the Ukrainians comparing to the refugees of previous flows and the ongoing flows, because there are still a lot of people fleeing from other countries and in particular from Afghanistan. Thank you. For the time being, I stop here.
Thank you very much. Monica, I would also like to hear from you, if you want to. What do you see? Do you see a paradigm shift now within Europe?
I would like to see one. Yeah. Well, let me put this. Always, you know, the academics are terrible. Always from two sides, at least. So I think actually it could be possible to see now that it is that the EU is able to take in a really high number of people and not breaking down or whatever there is, and to learn from that this could also be possible in the future. So we could learn that that it is not like this in this saying, which is very, or was very popular at the time, the boat is full, a state is not a boat, a state is not a fixed container. It's a question of financing and of developing infrastructure. It's not that difficult actually. So this would be the optimistic part of that. I'm not very optimistic about that. I rather think that that what has been said before, also that even the solidarity with Ukrainian citizens will probably get tired after some months. We saw that in many of these situations, that after some months or a year or whatever it is, that they said, okay, well, but they are still here. This is kind of a problem. So I rather expect something like that. And then, because Julia was talking about that, I mean, there are two parts of that. One is that people are accepted with all the problems and limitations that we talked about. And the other thing is that the member states acted united. And Julia mentioned this planned pact on migration and asylum. That this pact is has not been introduced shows very clearly that we do not have this unity up to now. And out of my position as an activist, but somehow also as an academic, I would say this is really good news. This pact is a pact against migration and against asylum. I mean, we'll not go deeply into that, I think, because we're lacking the time, and so it's not really our topic here. But actually the vice president of the commission, Margarete Sinas, he described it once very aptly. He said the pact is a 3-floor building, and the first floor should be well, changing the conditions in the countries of origin. So basically people should stay where they already are. And I mean, we could discuss that, but as we see it up to now, this means border protection, border security, even in parts of the world which are not part of the European Union, in Western Africa or wherever. Then we have the second floor of reinforcing the outer borders of the European Union, fast-track procedures at the borders, so that people cannot enter. And then we have the third floor, and this is if people now against all intentions really enter. And then we have the solidarity mechanism between the member states. And as we saw in 2016, it is not possible to have this kind of distribution of refugees. I mean, I see that as problematic to send people around the European Union, but this was obviously not the point. The point was that many member states didn't want to accept that. So it is then about money. So those who take refugees get money, those who don't pay. And one part that I think is really especially cynical here are the so-called returnship sponsorships. Those countries which do not take in refugees finance for other countries to deport these people or to let them voluntarily return, which is sometimes a rather slight difference. So this pact, I think, would show a unified voice of the member states and would make the situation worse, which is bad because by the end of the day, what we have is a kind of asylum lottery. We also know that it depends on where you come, how high your chances are that you get asylum or subsidiary protection or whatever it is. Part of this pact, and maybe this is interesting now, is you know that this directive that has been used now for the first time, as it was so obviously dysfunctional. In 2020, the Commission proposed already to terminate it, for it not longer to be valid, and to have a regulation. And this regulation would mean that the Commission, without the acceptance of the Council, could say we have now this problem of mass influx of displaced people, so we need a temporary protection. And it would mostly address the member state or member states concerned, so they could give protection without a proper asylum procedure. And it would include that the states then can have fast-track procedures at the borders for every asylum seeker from a country where we have in average less than 75% positive decisions in the European Union. So in normal times, these fast-track procedures would be for people from countries where we have less than 20% positive decisions. Also, this is problematic. Asylum is an individual right and has to be assessed individually. But anyway, with 75%, so only those who have more than 75% positive decisions in EU average, nowadays I looked it up, it would be Venezuela, Syria, and Eritrea, full stop, no more than that. So we would even be in a worse situation for what we discussed before about this differentiation. So yeah, I think I make a point here. So I think we have really to differentiate here between two types of solidarity. One is the solidarity between the member states, which can very well mean and frequently mean solidarity in closing borders. And one is solidarity with those who are coming. And these are, yeah, just to be clear in what we are talking about. Thanks.
Thank you very much for this differentiation. I think we could have many more panels on the pact and on EU policies. Indeed, we don't have the time now, but thanks for pointing or highlighting these aspects, Monica. I think I would one more time also invite our participants here in the room to join in. I know it's been intensive discussions already this morning, so we see the differentiation between solidarity among member states. We see solidarity towards the people on the move, and I would also like to look a little bit into the differentiation between the societies and the authorities within the EU. So when we, for instance, look at the big solidarity which we see in Poland, we can also see that it's civil society organizations taking over tasks. I mean, Magda, you also mentioned it, like how far is it a state response, even though member states or their governments decided upon the protection mechanism, and this happened really fast. But when implementing protection, we again see that it's in most member states, it's so far the civil society activists, organizations on the ground really doing the job. So I would like to ask you to reflect on what do you foresee, how much longer? We see a lot of chaos obviously coming up, a lot of, I mean, this is all a fluid situation, right? But what do you think is needed, and what would you foresee? I know you all don't have a crystal ball to look into the future, but what would you foresee to come, you know, and how far will the situation take shape, and what do you expect to see as a development, and what would be needed really from states and from our societies, from the EU side? You name the actors.
Yeah, thank you. I think that for me, as a person working in migration and asylum for really like 15 years in the Czech Republic, I was at the very beginning surprised how, in a way, unprepared is the state for opening the emergency shelter and accommodation for people coming. And actually, I'm still not sure what's the capacity of the state of the Czech Republic in the emergency shelter, the refugee facilities, and other possible accommodation. What I expected was that people would come through the emergency shelters where they would be registered, and then they would move for I would say 3 months accommodation and towards the long-term accommodation. This is not happening, and it's still not happening in the Czech Republic. Most people are actually channeled to the private households, to share the apartments, to like the hospitality business, meaning hotels and hostels, opened their doors and provided accommodation, but they expect it to be for 2 or 3 weeks, and now it's clear that it's going to take much longer. And the response from the state is, I think, still quite slow. We are pushing some long-term solutions, and we are, because I mean, access to housing is a huge issue in the Czech Republic as such for the nationals as well. There is a lot of investments into the owners of flats and apartments that are held as investment that are actually not used, which creates problems at the market. And we are pushing the government to think in a systemic way on the access to housing, and to provide incentives for people who are owners of such accommodation to open it up and provide it to basically to people arriving from Ukraine, but as well open it and work on this issue in order to open it for the nationals and migrants already residing in the country to access decent housing. I think what we are seeing as well is the lack of the local municipalities and local governments to be more involved and to deal with the situation more locally. For us as an organization, being in Prague, the response of the city of Prague in terms of housing is for me quite slow, and there is no good system in place still. So they are placing people somewhere, but they don't know really where, and there is not enough like mapping of the needs and follow-up services. So I think it's actually the biggest challenge that we need to solve, is the accommodation and safe accommodation, and that we need to have a system for people who are already accommodated to return back to the state or city or municipality to say, I'm not safe in my accommodation, I need something else. Because since we are not opening the social system, social allowances system or social benefits enough for people to access the normal benefits in order to have decent housing, then we need to have specific measures on this. So I think that this is the biggest challenge that we are facing. We don't want to build huge refugee facilities. It's something that's clear from the civil society that we are not recommending this. And we are recommending some measures to access decent and suitable housing for people. But the government has to make huge investments in that. They have to decide that it's a priority, which we are not hearing still yet. And if this is not done, I think that all the next integration steps will fail in a way. I think that we see some decisions based on the system, but it's not enough. And I think that there are still people in the government who don't really realize how huge and enormous the situation is, and what's the responsibility here, that it's not going to disappear, and those people won't disappear from the Czech Republic. There are still some people who think that they come for months, and when the war is over, in the second month, then they will go back, which is not going to happen, as we all who are sitting here know that this is not happening at all. And I'm quite positive if the issue of accommodation and access to basic services is solved, then the other steps like access to education and labor market will be possible, and that we as a civil society will then be able to provide services only to those who are not fitting the system in a way, who are falling behind. But right now we are actually providing the services to everybody, which is just too big for quite small civil society. And I think it's very well as well interconnected to the fact that as a migration organizations, we have been really challenged by our governments for years in Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Slovenia. So our capacity is actually quite minimal because we were actually targets and labeled as traitors of the countries. And now we are the first responders, but having much smaller capacity than we should have for this task, of course.
Thank you, Magda. It's quite impressive to see. We yesterday discussed shrinking spaces for civil society, showing solidarity with people on the move, and it's what you just your last comment is quite impressive with this, with regard to this. So thank you. Do the others, Aygul, do you want to reflect on that question? I mean.
We are facing in Slovenia abnormal, almost non-existing housing policy. You know, after the collapse of Yugoslavia, they privatized almost 90% of public housing, and they didn't build anything in between. So at this moment, an ordinary family has to pay 60–70% of their income to rent, which is my family also doing right now. And we have been looking, because of this, you know, engagement with Ukrainian refugees and with short-term renting, our long-term refugees with reunited families from Somalia, Eritrea, and Sudan stayed absolutely without housing. And it takes like for 2 weeks, you know, to look for. So I just want to say generally, for example, from the structural point of view, that the accommodation of Ukrainian refugees in long term will be very difficult. And the whole spectrum of care is, as usually before, outsourced to non-governmental organizations. It works like this, you know. I mean, sorry, the country that approves 19 international protection statuses and all this. So we are talking about non-existing operational structures in Slovenia, apart from 2 camps that are the same number of people, 300, something like this. So, and we know that there are 7,000 people right now from Ukraine, and we know that it's a very big populism in media on one side and incapability to provide capacities on the other side. And then we have quite big number of Russian and Ukrainian migrants living here with permanent residency, citizens, or temporary residency permits. If they are not, we wouldn't have even those 7,000. So 95% of people who came to Slovenia are living with their fellows, relatives, and with some Slovenian families that, you know, and when the state said, okay, now we will pay hostels, hotels, come on, people, we are, you know, accepting proposals from the whole, they received 143 proposals from hostels and small hotels for only 600 places. Can you imagine this? So we are not surprised. We know exactly what will happen, and we know that the whole thing will fall down, and we are ready for this, actually, how things will go on. Especially our grassroots collective, we usually work with people who are absolutely outside of the system. So sans-papiers, you know, people who are on the streets and people who actually lost their legitimate right to have any kind of status. For example, people who arrived from Ukraine 22nd of February are differently processed than the ones who arrived 24th. And our bureaucrats, completely recognizing the objectivity of the war, are no, you will ask for international protection according to International Protection Act because you arrived 22nd of February, and all those who arrived 24th and on will get immediately all benefits and everything under the Temporary Protection Act. You see, and we will have again another 5 different categories, people without rights in a year, and then we will be like, okay, you know, like putting down the fire all the time, And I have one question for Julia Amaducci, because you said a lot with your, you said that, yes, we have this solidarity, and now the European Union showed that we can unite ourselves in order to help people. You said this. And we agree with this. But my question is, don't you think that the European migration policy is under the hostage of nationalist countries that are protecting the external borders of the European Union? This is my question. You know, when it comes to the solidarity, new pact, and when it comes to the relocation of Afghani people, you know, from Spain, or the relocation of thousands of refugees who were arriving in Greece and Italy, and then this, our ministers of the interior and Visegrad 4 and some others, they said their firm no, we will not this. You know, do you understand even double standards in this solidarity? You know, we are not from yesterday, you know, we've read the laws, we know the rights, we know how operationalize these rights on the terrain. We work with people every day for 20 years. You know, we want the authorities to say our solidarity is divided. When it comes to this point, we are all ministers of the interior of the European Union are united. And when it comes to this point, we are divided. And this is how we function. Why don't you say this openly and sincerely? I'm sorry, because, you know, this solidarity that is working right now, it happened because nationalist governments and their ministers of the interior said yes, because there are some more interests apart, you know, some geopolitical interests that we will not talk because it's too much. And then when it comes to relocate Afghan refugees after Taliban took the power from Spain, they came to Slovenia in a really small number, and Slovenian government gave them the status completely different of a foreigner, international protection status, subsidiary protection, something extra, without rights to healthcare. Sorry, you know, this is how I feel.
Thank you, Aygul. Thank you very much. Anyhow, I would say, I already wanted to ask Julia, so we have the question of still state versus society's solidarity, and Aygul's question on the differences between, well, different group of people on the move. And would you like to reflect on both, you, Julia?
They're difficult question. I mean, you have said it all, and about the nationalistic hostage. That's what I was saying before. We have seen in this situation that some member states, like Hungary and Poland, have reacted in a different way toward this refugees flow than before, and this was a surprise, in a sense, positive surprise, because they have reacted in a different way as they have reacted until now. So, yes, the discussion on the migration pact is hostage of some member states who do not agree and have a different view on migration. And this is the beauty or non-beauty of the European Union, that you have to work with different member states, different perspectives, and migration is really a hot issue. And it's a difficult issue. It's difficult to work in this field, as you all know. and just we move very little step by step, one step ahead and three behind, and then we move like this, and we move, and crises have an effect on the path in a different way. So these crises show that we need to work together. As I said before it was the southern countries who have to face more the refugee flows. Now it happens at another part of Europe. So it means that one day it's you and the other day it's me. So this will bring a reflection, and we hope that we have to take advantage of this situation to make things forward and work together, to have a mechanism together. Whether the migration pact is perceived good or not good, it's blocked, it's going little by little, there is discussion. And I think this emotional thing which is happening now, it's a moment that, you know, allow us to discuss in this context, in a political context, in a different way, and having different perception. Because as was said before, also the solidarity moment will last for a few months. Then we will have to face the problems at the local level, because housing, schooling, work, and it will not last. Considering plus that this economic crisis is coming after, will also put the national population in a very difficult economic situation. So we will have a war between poor, not only, you say, among different categories of refugees or migrants, but also among different categories of poor people for housing. Why I'm waiting for a house and I'm as an Italian and I don't get a house, and the other one who just came in from Ukraine will have a house. These are the questions that people will ask. So there will be really big social tensions, and we have to be careful to that. So I think that this moment of being able to be together, as we had during the COVID period, that we managed to do things together, will make things move forward. But I don't have a solution for this. But I think that our commissioner is really pushing things, is really next to the people, and I think she's doing a good job. But do not hope that what will come out will make everybody happy. I know there are people who are more focused on bordering, other more on individual cases of people fleeing war. It's the beauty of the Commission and the European Union is that we have to discuss and try to find a compromise. So this is the only thing I can say. Of course, geopolitical interest above, yes, migration is used as a geopolitical game, and we have seen it, Syrians, and then in Belarus, and now Ukrainians, because getting people from Ukraine is another guns that Putin is having, influencing people to destabilize the European Union. So there are different aspects that we have to take into consideration, and it will not be of an easy solution. So I can only say that it's good that we speak about it, that we work together, and that everything you said, of course, it comes into me, and I will some things I agree, some things I do not agree, but I don't have the solution in mind. But the fact that we are there, things are moving in a way, it's a good step, but there will be not only consequences at the social level, but there is also the organized crime organization who will take a huge advantage of this. So we have to take care and be aware of also of this. So we need to intervene as a state level as fast as possible. Otherwise, in terms of housing and labor market, there will be someone else who is going to intervene. So this is also another element we have to take into account. But I don't know if I have replied to your questions, but this is what I can say in terms of reaction like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's also good to we haven't tackled all challenges that are there. You just mentioned trafficking, the vulnerability of the Ukrainian or people who had to flee from Ukraine. As I said initially, almost half of them being children. I mean, this is obviously this will pose a challenge, and obviously these are very vulnerable people. And Monica, I would just give you the final comment. So many questions came up meanwhile to answer to, so you're free to pick. But I think we are indeed running out of time, so I would just kindly ask you to give your final comment on the issues of solidarity, the authority was the state and the EU member states and the different reactions. I mean, yeah, we could go on, but.
Yeah, this is now also a big task. Okay, let me maybe start up with, with what I was reflecting while Julia was speaking. I mean, yeah, we have these structural problems of the European Union, which you call the beauty and the problem. And I see here also several problems. I mean, okay, one is the member states are the masters of the treaties. The member states are deciding how the European Union is further developing. This is part of this structure. So obviously we have all this nationalistic stuff in that, and this is hindering the progress of integration. It now, neutrally spoken, that it is more integrated, if it is for good or for worse, for what we want. Two other things that I think are problematic structurally here is, on the one hand, that we have a lot of possibilities for blame shifting between the member states and also to the European level. And this was said this morning, and I think it's quite clear. I mean, we all know what Croatia is doing. We all know about these pushbacks. And we also all know that this is in the interest of many other member states, including the one where I'm living, because this is the point that people should get out. But then you say, okay, maybe you could do it in a bit of a less brutal way or something like that. And the other thing is that we very frequently have a run to the bottom. And this is also a problem, that somehow the lowest standards are at least those on which a consensus can be found. And this again is a problem with regard to asylum and migration. And within all these kind of situation, we have refugees, and now for Ukrainian citizens, this does not apply. But as we know, usually we have the Dublin system, which by chance somehow gives you the possibility to live in the European Union or not. So far to that, and I mean, I'm really not optimistic when it comes to the future of EU migration policies and asylum policies. I said that already with regard to the pact. And thus I think that we as civil societies, I prefer the term political activists, actually have to go on with what we are doing, which also is sometimes not a reason for being very optimistic. I'm kind of myself somehow ambiguous between, okay, everybody who can stay is our success, and saying what we are doing up to exhaustion, and we all know that is a drop on a hot stone, and that's everything. But I think it has to be done on all the levels. And in this sense, I would, apart from everything that I said before, and in a very skeptical way about what is going on now with regard to Ukraine, as opposed to other refugees, I still think we should use it strategically. We should use it now to say, look, it works, it is possible. And when it is possible for, I don't know how many millions of Ukrainians, then it is also possible with regard to some thousand people from wherever they come. I think it is, with all the doubts that we raised, I think it is strategically the best way to use the situation now. Thank you.
Thank you for this strategic outlook, and thanks to all our panelists. I think we have discussed many levels here. I mean, we've seen the EU's response. We've divided between EU and her member states. I think one thing that we also talked about a future potential EU policy, and at the same time the debate we had so far and the deadlock. And I think it's really important to also keep in mind that despite all the back and forth on the new pact and potential new reforms, it's not that we don't have a system in place. And I think the Ukraine situation nicely proved that. I mean, nothing about this is nice, but the pure fact that we do have a directive that many even weren't aware of, that all of a sudden could be applied, I think also made clear that we do have already, without agreeing on reforms and a new pact, we do have a system in place. And what we heard today regarding the pushbacks and the human rights violations, but also yesterday, I think, made clear that it's not just a lack of a system, but it's really about also implementation. And it's really also about holding accountable those who do not stick to the already existing rules. And here I also must say I see a potential role for the European Commission, because as Monica rightly said, the member states are the masters of the EU, but then the Commission is also the master of the common laws and the rules that we have within the EU. So one more time, I want to really thank all our panelists, and I think everyone in the room is probably hungry as I am. So I would wrap up this panel, and we will see again, those of you who are here, we will see each other again at sure.
Thank you. Sorry to keep you all waiting for eating. I just have a very short comment. First of all, thanks to Aigul to remind us that at Belarusian and Polish border, something happened just a few months ago. Many people seem to have forgotten about that. And second of all, I just want to make a comment also and be very clear. On the one hand, I understand when we use this word like the beauty of the EU, we just should differentiate on one side the plurality and the differences that are the structural foundation of the EU. And on the other hand, we have nationalism, xenophobic attitude and behavior or policy as well. So we should condemn. The EU is not based on nationalism and xenophobia. And also, I would like to remind to all of us that from what I have learned today from these three cases in Czech Republic, in Austria, but also in Slovenia, I see that actually the institutional response seems to be, from what we heard, very not really capable to respond to the needs. But what we see is actually the people, the day-to-day individual collective response from human to human, which I think it's an important element. And once again, as it happened already during the last few years, we remember 2015 but also before. And how much also this cost to all of us in terms of times, but also in terms of money. And I would like to remember that since 40, 30 years, we have mainly women from Ukraine working in the sector of care in many of the member states under very exploitative conditions. So one question would be like, do you think this is an opportunity for many of these workers to gain what they deserve since many years? And some of these women are actually those who are hosting their relatives, the friends of their friends, and so on. And I also want to make a comparison. I mean, unfortunately, the audio sometimes was not very good, so I didn't understand how much money have been mobilized from the Commission, especially on the response to Ukraine. I was checking online. So what I know is that the European Peace Facility, which actually it's mainly about weapons and armaments, in a month mobilized like 1 billion euros. So I would like to know how much money have been mobilized in terms of humanitarian support. Thank you.
So who feels ready to answer? Julia, maybe you can repeat the number again.
On the humanitarian support, I have to go and check the figures. What I was saying before is that now just on the line are now 70 billions from the cohesion funds, and then we have other millions from the home funds. I did not touch all the other parts on the humanitarian side, and I need to go and check the figures. But anyway, it's much more than what was released for guns and military support. So while the other speaker, I see if I can find the information now while the other people maybe conclude or intervene.
I think apart from that, I mean, it was self-answering. I mean, in Austria, we have especially had many Ukrainian seasonal workers in agriculture who have been exploited big time. And I read recently that our farmers, I mean, these are not small farmers, the big farmers, that they are now really preoccupied that they will not get any longer these very cheap workers because they will not come from Ukraine. And those who are here from Ukraine now, they will hopefully not take these jobs because at least they get a bit of money and have other job offers. So this is also, and it's quite amazing and cynical how this is reported. I mean, the problems that these poor farmers have, and they do not find workers. No, for this kind of money, you do not find Austrian workers, but this could be easily solved, this problem. Still, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just pessimistic today. But in the long run or the mid-range run, I'm rather concerned that also people now coming from Ukraine or whatever citizenship they have, that they will be exploited as those who were already here, at least those of them who don't have a very special education or something. So in a way, I think whenever there is a high influx also of a potential labor force, that this is also a potential for exploitation. And one thing that I think highly problematic is that at least in Austria, but also in some other countries, the trade unions do not really deal with this issue, or they deal with this issue in a way that they get super xenophobic and saying this is exactly the problem, these people cannot come in because this is this run to the bottom. And here, I think it would be very important, not only with regard to Ukrainians, but general, to have some kind of cooperation and to say, look, we have to fight for minimum wages and whatever is it, irrespectively of the citizenship and if the people came yesterday or I don't know, 20 years ago.
So I don't know, Magda Aigul, if you want to reply. I mean, we could for sure also have not only panels, but also conferences on discrimination within in Europe, for those who live here, some of them decades. And for sure there's discrimination on the labor market and in all parts of society. So yeah, Magda, do you want to?
Well, I'm not sure if I have some more things to add apart that what was said. Yes, there is discrimination and there will be a discrimination. And I think that what we hear as well from the employers or some employers and what we are already seeing at in the field is that all those shady employment agencies who have been hiring Ukrainians for years are doing the same thing now with those who are arriving. Those people are lacking the contracts. They are working long hours for few money. So everything that has been here before the war, the precarity of the jobs that migrants were doing is this again applicable for those who are arriving. I see it as an opportunity, this attention that has been that we see from the government and European Union and European Commission currently on the migration crisis, which I think they really call as a refugee or migration crisis, apart from the one several years ago. that we might have a spotlight to fight the rights and to fight the discrimination and racism within our societies. On the other hand, I'm in line with Monica. I'm quite pessimistic and I see the challenges. And yeah, I would like to end on the positive note. And I do think that societies in the Central Europe can see the potential of migration now and the possibilities that it, after the initial investments into the integration process in a long term, it can really have a positive impact on the situation from the economical point of view, even though I don't really want to monetarize migrants and migration as such. And I think that this notion within the big companies within the country is starting to be more evident, and they are thinking maybe more long term rather than in a way of exploiting people who are coming, hopefully.
Thank you, Magda. So, shall we end on this rather positive note? Okay, then one more time, let me really thank all of you, Aigul, Magda, Monica, Julia, for your inputs and the lively discussion we had. And I think we had a lot of food for thought. And we will continue to discuss many aspects of what we heard in this panel in various occasions. So thanks to all of you, and thanks to you in the room.